Web development. This is lesson 19, understanding dynamic websites and HTML5 applications. So today we're going to look at how to conceptualize different types of dynamic content, how to include JavaScript in your HTML, how to display randomized text, how to change images by using JavaScript and user events, and how to begin thinking ahead to putting all the pieces together to create HTML5 applications. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is understanding the different types of scripting. Scripting languages, there are two kinds. There's server-side scripting languages that you use, and some of the languages out there that are popular are Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby. And then there's client-side scripting, and this is code that runs in your browser, and it uses JavaScript as the language that it runs in your browser. So the first thing we're going to look at is how do you include JavaScript in HTML. JavaScript can live in two places in your files. It could have its own file with a .js extension, or you can put it directly in your HTML file. So if you have it outside of your HTML file in its own file, and with the script tag, you have to use the src attribute to tell it the path to where your JavaScript file is. And then the HTML file in between the script, you actually have your code in between the begin script and end script elements here. So let me show you a quick example of this. So here you have an example. This text here, these 3 lines of text, the middle line was generated using JavaScript. The top was just straight HTML, so it was the last one, but the middle one was generated using JavaScript. So let's take a look at how we do that. We'll go to Visual Studio Code, and this is the index.html file. So as you can see here, what we've done is here, this is just the text in a paragraph tag like we normally do. But here, we're actually using JavaScript to output that second paragraph here. And we do that by calling the document.write method and passing it the text that we want to output. And you can see we're even putting the paragraph elements in our text to output HTML. And then finally, the last line was formulated using HTML there. Okay, the other thing we could do is we could also display some random content. So in this example, we're going to show you how we can create, basically what we do is we create an array to hold different quotes, and we use the random number generator to randomly choose one of the quotes. So just very quickly to show you how the random number generator works, you basically use the math.random to generate a number, and then you multiply it by the number of elements, the number of quotes that you have in your array. And then what that does is that this formula will basically choose a number between 0 and the length of your array. So if you have here, you have 4 quotes, so it'd be between 0 and 4. The numbers between 0 and 4, so you can have 0 through 3, which are because arrays are 0 based. That's so it'd be the numbers 0, 1, 2, or 3. So math random generates a number between 0 and 1, and then you multiply the length of the array, which is 4, so you get like I said, we get the number between 0 and 3. And and then the floor rounds the rest to the nearest whole number. So what it does, it gets rid of the decimal, is what the floor. So that's why we apply the floor to that. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our code here. Before we look at our code, let's go over here. All right, so here's the random. So if you look at over here, now this quote was randomly chosen. So we're outputting the quote and also the author. And one of the nice things we could do is I can hit the refresh page, and we'll get a different quote every time. We get some duplicates sometimes, but because there's only 4 quotes. But as you can see, it's pretty random, the quotes that you get. All right, so how did we do that? Let's take a look at our code. We'll look at the random.html. Now, a couple things here that you want to look at. First is where are we generating, how are we generating the quote here? So here you have quotable quotes. First thing we're doing here is we're importing, we're kind of saying, hey, the Java is going to be in this random.js file that's in the JavaScript directory. So we have a separate JavaScript directory here, and here's the random.js file. So I'll go ahead and put that in there. Nope. I want to also do this. Let's put the random. There we go. That's what I want. All right. So let's take a look at the random .js. So what we've done is we created a function called getQuote. And then what we do here is we create these quotes and sources variable that are just arrays. And what they're going to do is they're going to hold the quote and the source of the quote, so the author of the quote. And so we have 4 of them. As you can see, these are zero-based arrays, so they start at 0. Even though we have 4 of them, they only go 0 through 3 on the indexes. So that's one thing to be aware is arrays are zero-based in Java. So here's that formula I showed you here, that we go ahead and get our random number. So our random number gets stored in the I variable here. And then we grab the quote and the name of the author from each of the corresponding array. And we use that document.write that we saw on the home page to write out like the paragraph tag, the quote, and then we also have the dash and the name of the author, and then the paragraph tab, and that's what gets written out there. All right, let's go back here, and so the next thing we want to kind of talk a little bit about is the document object model. So anytime you have client-side interactivity, it takes the form of manipulating the DOM, or the document object model. We'll abbreviate document object model DOM because it's easier to say. So whenever I say DOM, I'm referring to the document object model. The overall container object is called the document. So that's why you always do that document.write. And any container within the document that you've given an ID is referenced by the ID attribute. So you can add an ID, kind of like the way we added a class to any element to style it. You can also add an ID to any element. And you can also use your IDs in your CSS too. Or you can use them in your JavaScript, which is really what we're going to do now. All right, so if we wanted to refer to whatever element has the ID of wrapper, we could say document.wrapper. And then to change the background color of the div in your JavaScript, you can say document.wrapper.style.background color. So you can actually do your styling in JavaScript rather than CSS, and set the different styling properties of the element, like this rather than use CSS. Now, in a way, you're better off using CSS to do your styling. The only time you would use JavaScript to do your styling is if you want to style things dynamically. That would probably be the only reason I would do that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is this idea of unobtrusive JavaScript. And there's basically 4 rules to unobtrusive JavaScript. It should be usable, so it should work without being noticed by the user. It should be easily degradable, so it shouldn't generate any error messages. And this is especially if their browsers for some reason have JavaScript turned off. You shouldn't really notice it. You want to make it accessible, so you shouldn't rely on JavaScript for core functions. And you want to keep it separate from structure and style. So you always want to place it in a separate file from your HTML and CSS. And that's what we do in all our examples. We always put it in a separate file. Because it's a good habit to get into. You don't want to mix your code in with your HTML. Similar to the way we have a separate CSS file, you should also have a separate JS file, JavaScript file. So how do you use the DOM to make a script unobtrusive? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to always make sure to add an HTML element where the quotes can be placed. So what you want to do is you want to put like want to use an ID and pick an ID. Here we use the ID of quote to pick the ID. And then what we do is we're going to use the document get element by ID, and then we give it the ID we gave it. So this quote corresponds to the ID that we set on our element here. And now what we do is we make sure we update the contents of that block quote element using the .inner HTML. And then what that does is it changes the contents of that element. It changes the, whatever is in between that element, it changes that. So that we can print the quotes directly out to that. And that's kind of what we've done in this version. So if we go over here and we go to the unobtrusive JavaScript, well, this is it's almost the same thing. So here as the other example, but the only difference is the way we write out the JavaScript. The JavaScript is actually written out a little bit differently. So let's take a look at what we've done with the JavaScript here. So I'll go ahead and open up the unobtrusive HTML here. And then we have our unobtrusive JavaScript, JS. And let's go take a look. Again, everything kind of looks the same. The only difference now is the quote and the author have a different ID. So the block quote, the quote has an ID of quote. The source has an ID of source. So again, we use the script to point to our JS file. And then here we're calling that get quote from inside of this other script. So what does get quote do? Well, again, this looks exactly like the old one. The only difference is over here is that we're getting the element using the ID. So we do this document.getElement by ID. So that gets it gets a reference to that block quote and also that paragraph that has the source. So it uses the ID that you set up. So it has to be spelled exactly like what you put in the ID, and then that'll grab a reference to it. This all remains the same from last time, so does the math. But now writing out the quotes is actually a lot easier, because now we can just say blockquote.innerHTML and then assign it to quote, and then it'll print out that quote in the block quote, and then also in the source it'll print that out. So that inner HTML, and the nice thing is it just replaces whatever was in there before with a new piece of text. So that's the way you do that dynamically. The other thing I wanted to show you here was just Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of that. Just show you how in the CSS to reference, because I don't think I've gone over this as far as referencing IDs. Um, these we reference, if you remember for classes, you use the dot in your CSS to reference a class and style a class. So these are the quote, and there's a class of quote. I think I might have had that in the original. Let me see where we had that. Oh no, it was in the. It was in the random one. Okay, so here we have the random. Let's see. No, this isn't here. Yeah, there's no class there. Oh yeah, I must not be using it. But anyways, so if you want to style an ID, you use the hashtag instead of the dot. If it's a class, you use the dot. If it's an ID, you use the hashtag. So hashtag quote, this will style the quote. Same thing for the source down here. This will style the source. And here we use IDs instead of classes there. All right. All right, so let's go back here. One of the last things we're going to cover is changing images based on your user interaction. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one large photo. And what we want to do is we want to have some thumbnails of different photos underneath there. So when you click on the thumbnail, that image appears, the large version of that image appears. So for instance, just to kind of show you what I mean, here you have a thumbnail viewer that we've created. And what you could do is when we click on each of these, it's going to change the image. So this is kind of nice because it's very interactive. As you click through here, it just changes what image is displayed. And this is just shows you the smaller version of that image, so you know what that image is, kind of like a preview of the image before you see the large version of it. So how does that work? Basically what we're doing is we're taking, creating the image, and we give an ID of large photo. And then in the JavaScript, what we've done is we use the onClick event with these anchor elements. So we create an anchor element with an onClick. So when you click on there, it replaces whatever the source of that image was, the original source, with a new image. So you give it the file name where your image is stored as the new source, and then it'll do a replace of that. So just to kind of show you, let's go over here, thumbnail. Here we go. So we'll look at this, and we'll also look at the JavaScript for the thumbnail. All right, so let's start here. So, the large image is this image element, and we give an ID of large photo, and then we give it the initial photo we want to display. So in this case, it's the Waterbury photo. And then this is just alternate, so if you hover over it, it says large photo or something. All right. Now those thumbnails, what we've done here is we've surrounded our thumbnail images by these anchor tags, because this anchor tag is what's going to respond to the click event of your mouse. So when you click on the image, it's actually going to go ahead and what I've done is I've actually gone ahead and put all my code that switches the images into this thumbnail.js. So I created a function called change image that passes each of the path to the file names of the images here, and then that is what switches the image. Okay, and then the other thing we created is we created a thumbnail class, and the reason for that if you look over here, so the class, because this is the dot, this is the one that does it. I basically created, I just use the same image, but I reduced the size of the image by giving it a width of 100 pixels. Where the width of the large photo, if you look down here, and again, this is an ID, so that's why it's got the hashtag. It's got a width of 800, so that's why you have the large 800 photo and the small 100 pixel thumbnail. And that's just, I just use styling to do that. And I use the height auto to keep the perspective. So as the width shrinks, it keeps the same perspective. The same proportions, I guess, is really what I wanted to say there. Okay, so the other thing is, let's look at this change image. Actually, it doesn't do much. What it does is, and here you're seeing a function. This is different from the other functions we've been seeing. This function, the change image function, it takes a parameter. So here it's taking an image, the string of the file name as a string. So what we do is we do document.images, and then we say, hey, we want the large photo image, and we want to change the source attribute, so we can do .src equals image, and then that is what sets the image. Okay, so thinking ahead to developing HTML5 applications. So interactivity comes with HTML5 applications, and when they are paired with server-side applications. So usually the reason you have server-side application, because the server-side is really where you do your, you query your data, like you might have a database that you query on the server side. And there's a lot of security reasons why you want to do something server-side, because the code on server side you can't really see. On your browser, you can actually see all your JavaScript and all your code on the browser. So anything you want to hide from a user for security reasons, you want to do all that stuff on the server side. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of feature-rich JavaScript libraries out there. We're not going to cover that in this class, but just mention there's Angular, jQuery, and React are the top 3 out there. All right, so that's all we had for today. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.